What is the Constitution? Chapter 4, Small versus Big. The small states hated the Virginia Plan. The rule in the former Congress had always been one state, one vote. So all states, whether big or small, had equal power. But the Virginia Plan would change that. It based each state's numbers of representatives on population. The more people a state had, the more representatives it would send to Congress. Small states insisted they would never go along with this. They'd be swallowed up by big states such as Pennsylvania. Delegates from the small states of Delaware seemed ready to walk out at any minute. Big states were just as stubborn. It made sense for states with more people to have more representatives. Arguing went on for days. Then a group of small states decided it was time to form a new plan of their own. Led by the hardworking William Paterson of New Jersey, they worked out at night to create the New Jersey Plan. It called for a federation of states, not a strong national government. Congress would still have just one house, and each state would have equal number of representatives. Sound familiar? It was. So here's showing the difference there. Delaware only had a population at that time of 40,000, while Pennsylvania had a population of 300,000. That's a very big difference in population size. James Madison stood up and ripped apart Paterson's New Jersey Plan. It had the same problems as the Articles of Confederation, he said. Such a government had already failed Americans, and it would let them down again. The majority of the delegates agreed with Madison. The New Jersey Plan wouldn't work. On June 19th, it was voted down. That left only the Virginia Plan, the one that called for a new central government. Now it was clear that the delegates weren't just improving the articles. They were creating a whole new constitution. In the history of the world, this had never happened. Men had never sat in a room to create a government from scratch. Could this grand experiment work? Just because the New Jersey Plan was voted down, that didn't mean the small states were giving in. They were still determined to have equal representation in Congress. Delegates from big states tried everything to get the small states to change their mind. James Madison pointed out that the aim of the Virginia Plan was not to put the big states in charge. The goal was to give power to all of the people. Governor Morse from Pennsylvania took Governor Morse from Pennsylvania took a far-sighted approach. In the future, he said, people would think of themselves as Americans first, not as citizens of states. And the small states simply wouldn't budge, and neither would the big states. A lot of delegates were ready to sink the convention rather than give in. On the last Saturday of June, the delegates walked to the State House in sweltering heat. Buzzing blue bottle flies dive-bombed around their heads. That morning, the convention sank into its lowest point. Gunning Bedford from the small state of Delaware fumed. "I do not, gentlemen, trust you," he said. "Foreign powers such as France would be happy to help out the small states." Was Bedford hinting that soon there would be a civil war in the United States? Rufus, King of Massachusetts, charged that the small states were acting vicious. He insisted he would never adopt an equality of votes. George Washington's face looked grim as he left the State House that day. The convention was held together by the strength of a hair, said Luther Martin of Maryland. Fortunately, Sunday was a day off. On Monday, the delegates voted again on the Virginia plan. Every man must have held his breath as the votes came in. The final tally, 5 states voted yea, 5 states voted nay, and 1 vote was a split vote. It was a tie, a deadlock. Remember, New Hampshire delegates didn't arrive until July. What could be done? The delegates didn't want to give up. They felt the eye of the world were upon them. To save the convention, they chose a committee made up of 1 person from each state to try and solve the problem. 10 days later, after a break over the July 4th holiday, the committee reported back. They thought they had a solution. The House of Representatives would be based on population. That's what the big states want. The Senate, however, would have 2 members for each state. That pleased the small states, and it would take both houses to pass any law. Called the Great Compromise, it was accepted by the delegates and written into the Constitution. A man named Roger Sherman from Connecticut was the brains behind it. Ever since then, it's dictated how Congress is set up. Today, there is still 2 senators from each state. The House of Representatives now has 435 members. California, the state with the most people, has 53 representatives. Wyoming, which is big in terms of land but has the smallest population, only has 1 representative. Today, we look at the painting of the framers of the Constitution dressed up in white powdered wigs, knee breeches, and buckled shoes. Because they all looked alike, it's easy for us to assume they all thought alike. It was far from the truth. With such huge differences in opinion, it's astounding that they ever reached the Great Compromise.